It's a great pleasure to welcome you today for this lunch talk. It's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Veronika Grimm. Veronika joins us. She works at the University of Erlangen-Nürnberg, and on top of this, and that is what she's very well known for, she is a member of the German Council of Economic Experts. I actually like the German word of it, which is Wirtschaftsweise, so which is not only experts, it's wise experts. So today we want to tap your wisdom. I want to tap your wisdom if you allow me to do that. And why you're here and what we will be talking about is the report, among others is the report that was issued by the Council that carries the title Overcoming Sluggish Growth Investing in the Future. And that's a topic certainly big for Germany, but not only for Germany, also for other European countries. So, but looking at Germany first, I mean, Germany has been in the news recently, not too good news because of the data that were forthcoming, where basically we find that Germany is in recession, and as the FT has titled it, is the worst performing major economy. And how should we think about it?
Yeah, I think first, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. On Germany, I think Germany has a hard time to recover for two reasons, because the energy crisis hit Germany particularly hard. We have a very important energy intensive industry, and we had a strong dependency on Russian gas. You see all of the places that the economies that have an important industrial sector have a harder time to recover than the economies with a very important service sector. They drop deeper but recover faster due to tourism. People travel again and spend money. But for the industry, it's hard. The competitiveness is low due to the high energy costs, for example, or due to supply chain problems. And I think we will take some time to recover. At the same time, of course, we have a transformation before us. So these industries are not only hit by the energy crisis, but also by the challenge to transform to climate neutrality at the same time. And that's an issue.
That's a bit of a long-term challenge. I mean, the way you portray it, and I agree with much what you say about we have this fact in Europe that we are hit by a common shock, and then you have a differential impact. Before, by the pandemic as well, you had a common shock, but in that case, actually, it hit other countries, the southern countries, more than Germany. So this is a phenomenon that we deal with in Europe, and we should also not overplay it. But for the German discussion, actually, there have been other things as well. I mean, another title that came up, or another discussion that came up, obviously, is this point about the sick man of Europe. We had been out of that for a while, but now you also say there are the long-term challenges. And wasn't it that also maybe one was a bit sleeping over some long-term challenges that are there, or how much is what we see now not only a reason, so to speak, of the bad luck of the crisis hitting us, the type of crisis hitting us, but also of longer-term issues?
I think it's certainly a mixture. I mean, you see that many countries have not used the period of good growth rates to tackle their problems. So you see this in Germany, definitely. There is the need for reforms in many dimensions, the pension system. We have the need for transforms in the transfer system. We could increase work incentives due to changes in the tax system. There are all kinds of needs for reforms which have not been tackled. In other European countries, you see a different development. For example, in other European countries, the debt ratios have not decreased during the time of good economic development, which is also somehow an opportunity that has not been used, that now, of course, decreases the room for maneuver. So I think this is a common phenomenon that in these times of good conditions, if there's no crisis, there's also a little bit of laziness to act.
Well, I mean, for us as a crisis mechanism, is there are obviously different arguments about the political economy of doing reforms, right?
Yeah.
And one of the arguments is never waste a good crisis, because that's the only time when you can move. I mean, we always hope it doesn't take a crisis to move, but obviously there are different elements here. I mean, I must say, from my perspective, also one of the elements that is there, where maybe other countries are actually doing more now or having stronger incentive to do something which is rather positive, is Next Generation EU, which sets a big incentive. I mean, it provides money, but it also sets a big incentive to invest and to do reforms. But again, going back to Germany in terms of factors of growth and long-term prospects, and you have alluded a bit to it, but I mean, in the report, you also make the point, which seems a bit to support this sick man narrative, if you wish, that potential growth is very low and can be expected to be very low in Germany. I mean, in terms of main drivers, what do you see?
So we have a projection of the production potential in the report. And in a baseline scenario, we assume that investment dynamics remain stable, remain the same. And then we see that the demographic change dampens growth quite a bit, to 0.4% in the years until 2028. And 0.4%, that's 1/3 of what we had in the last decade on average. And this is pretty low. One clear reason is that the baby boomer generation is retiring, and this decreases the labor volume available, and this decreases costs. And then you have, of course, several possibilities to counteract. One is, of course, to increase labor volume, and the other is to invest in order to increase productivity through productivity enhancing investment and the substitution of labor where labor is scarce.
One of the points in this labor market situation that we see is labor scarcity and low labor productivity growth has to do with the fact that the companies are actually afraid of laying off people and rather do labor hoarding. I mean, if you think of that, but at the same time now the economy is going down, or weaker than we had expected. Would you think, I mean, as we go forward, this behavior changes and the labor market would actually relax and we get more unemployment, or rather not?
I think, I mean, there are contradictory effects. We have a weak economic development at the moment, and typically you would have the fear of unemployment, but due to the demographic change, labor is so scarce, and firms might hoard labor, and therefore unemployment keeps at the rate of 5.5.
So you think even as we go through this monetary policy tightening, or as the impact of the monetary policy tightening that typically has a certain delay will be felt more, and we know that construction industry is suffering, but your prediction of that is not much more unemployment in Germany?
Yeah, I would expect that it remains quite stable because we have so much scarcity, not only for qualified workers, but also for workers in general, that I would expect that it remains stable due to that effect.
I mean, one of the points that you mentioned is this increasing labor volume, and you said there are still possibilities to do more. We know also that hours worked has declined or is declining, and that may be more structural. Workers, people participating in the labor market, I mean, we know that increased female labor participation has been one of the big drivers of the increased labor volume over the last decades, and that's very good. And actually the other point that we see, at least in Europe, is it has not been suffering from the crisis more recently. Typically before then, female would kind of migrate out of the labor market. It has not been the case. How much can we get from that still? I mean, since we already achieved quite a level.
Yeah, I think we achieved quite a level in terms of participation. So women participate in the labor market to the same extent, more or less, as men. But you observe that many of them work part-time. Of course, there are a lot of part-time workers with children and a lot of married part-time workers, but also women that are not married and don't have children work to a much larger extent part-time than men. And I think this indicates that there's quite some room for maneuver. But of course, there are conditions for that. So first, for women with children, there has to be childcare available for them to be able to work more hours a week. And then there is in the German tax system this disincentive due to the marginal tax playing rule, which is a financial disincentive for women to work if they are married. And it is somehow a psychological disincentive. You see in the literature that there must be some kind of psychological effect why this disincentivizes also women to work.
I mean, frankly speaking, I can say that from my own family history, there is in the German culture for quite some while this cultivated image of mothers staying at home.
Yeah.
And it has become a cultural thing, and we overcame it, hopefully, or largely, but maybe not entirely in there, but it may still play a role. But the only point what you mentioned, what I think is very important also when you say participation is high, in Germany it's more a question of hours worked, part-time, full-time, while in other European countries it is that participation rate is still relatively low and can be increased, and to acknowledge that then also the policy package may be a different one. But one of the points that is also there is this issue of migration, and that's obviously a super tricky one politically. I mean, where do we stand now? How much migration would we need, basically, in your view, and would that be politically digestible?
Yeah, that's basically the big question. We have increased migration rates. Of course, now recently, due to the war in Ukraine, we had a lot of migration into Germany. You see if people migrate, also if they migrate into the labor market or want to migrate into the labor market, this is quite difficult. There are quite some hurdles in Germany to integrate them. Bureaucracy, German firms are often reluctant to accept workers that don't speak German, things like this. So it takes some time until the people integrate into the labor market. And this also leads to the low hours worked in the production that at the beginning decrease the production potential in the upcoming years.
Isn't it actually that, I mean, to my knowledge, typically immigrants, well, immigrants are relatively young. They have relatively more bigger families or young families. They have also overall a higher labor market participation. Is that stylized fact correct or wrong? How do you see that?
I think overall, if you account also for the refugees that come into the labor market, it might not be the case. I mean, there is now the ambition to integrate also the refugees from Ukraine more faster into the labor market in other countries, like in the Netherlands and Denmark. Many more of them are working quite quickly than in Germany, and I think we have to overcome this. And of course, for people that come to us, not for everyone, labor market participation is high, and hours worked are high from the beginning on. Particularly those that are not migrating in the qualified work, but that are coming and then have to earn their living, for example, as a refugee from Ukraine. I think that's much more difficult still.
No, I agree, and probably it is very important to differentiate with what you want to have in terms of migration, labor market oriented migration, and what we have experienced and will experience forward looking in terms of having refugee waves. And with Ukraine, in a way, we were, maybe in a certain extent, it was kind of fitting because some of those people could be easily integrated into the labor market. We know that with other migration waves that was more difficult. But forward looking, we need to be prepared in a way. I think we need to be prepared for both.
Yeah.
And probably we need to even on that part where there is more kind of the economically driven migration that we want to attract, as you said, more that we need to do. And for the refugee part, I mean, also to say, we have to note there that recently there was an agreement about migration and asylum at the European level, which I think is very important in order to make it more palatable to people and eventually also allow for more integration. But there may be desired and undesired. For the one people that you want to attract, do you think Germany is an attractive site to migrate to become economically active?
Yeah, I think we have to work at it. I think it's correct that we have to somehow think a little bit separately about the two streams of migration to Germany and the EU. And we also have to open up an attractive channel for migration into the labor market so that those who want to come into the labor market and rather come as a refugee, so that they have an attractive channel to come to us without this channel that is not fitting for them. So this is, I think, very important. But we have also to set up institutions that are able to attract people more effectively. I think this is very difficult. You are using our institutions that we have that are more targeted towards refugees and not towards labor market migration. It has to be service oriented and it has to be more easy. So there's a lot of bureaucracy hindering people from coming to us, starting from language issues, then the question, can I come without having a job? So there's quite some things done in Germany now, but I think it has to be more targeted and there has to be service-oriented institutions that really are attractive for the people and attract people to us.
Again, just from a European perspective, indeed, we also note there are differences. And for example, at this stage already, you see a lot of migration, immigration for a country like Portugal or Spain, where obviously also the pool of people to attract, say, from Latin America elsewhere, related also to language, is bigger or they are more easy to attract. So that's an important factor. But I mean, in order to also move this a bit, you said migration cannot solve it all. We need productivity. And these days now Davos is going on, and Davos, artificial intelligence is a big topic. The IMF has just released a report or has published research that says 40% of the labor force will be affected by artificial intelligence. So is this the area where Europe should invest?
I think we have to prepare to use artificial intelligence in order to enhance productivity. The studies are very diverse. So if you look into the literature, there are studies that say AI can enhance productivity massively, can initiate a productivity boost, but of course there are prerequisites. I mean, you need to prepare the economy and have the set of rules that enables people and firms and also the public administration to accommodate AI and to enable people to use it. So, and in Europe, we have a tendency to regulate everything from the beginning and maybe also to over-regulate. And I think this is something where we have to really think how we do it. Because if we over-regulate and hinder firms and people to use it, then of course we will stay behind and maybe stay behind for long.
I mean, what I must say, I completely agree. Where we as economists are then often hard pressed is to convince people that are not only afraid of addressing or having to do with this new technology, but also to make the point that actually fear for their job, and then to make a clear argument. Yes, there may be one job may be lost, but there will be other jobs will be created. On balance, this will be fine, because that's obviously a big challenge. The other point is what you have learned from the IT revolution is that labor income got more spread, and not everyone was gaining. So
Yeah.
again, big point about income distribution.
Yeah, I think we don't have to fear so much about the jobs in the first place, because we have this labor market scarcity, and in a way, as an economy as a whole, in order to enhance productivity, we can be happy to be able to substitute a part of the jobs for which we don't have workers by technology, and also by immaterial capital goods like AI investments. I think this is very important in the context of migration. I think this is also very important to see that it's not the jobs where there's competition, but it's the living spaces. I think this is the dimension that will be very challenging, that housing capacities are a problem, and the construction sector is very much affected by the crisis. On the one hand, by the interest rate developments, by the high interest rates that decrease, of course, construction activity, and by the supply chains and by the cost increases of materials and so on. And both of this is very problematic also in the context of migration, because if there is such a competitive environment and people fear, for example, for competition for housing, then this is, of course, something that is very difficult to handle for the politicians.
I mean, the other point, and you mentioned a few elements here on needs for investment, and when we're thinking about supply chains, competitiveness, obviously the big area that is close to your heart comes energy. How do we think about energy costs? And then we cannot think about energy without thinking about climate change, the transformation. So, which is a big topic, and on how to move there. Now, Germany is particularly hard hit. So if you have to draw up a priority list, what do we do first, and what can we expect to happen if we look at Europe, and if we look globally for a solution as Germany? How would you categorize, or what comes first to your mind?
I think there are a few things that are clear and easy, and the European Union is already on the way to achieve that. And this, of course, concerns the expansion of renewables. I think everyone has understood that it is a good idea to expand renewables massively, to benefit from the good locations that we have in Europe, and to expand networks. Expanding networks turned out to be harder than we thought at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So some 10, 15 years ago in Germany, there was the idea of establishing a copper plate, building up renewables, and transmitting this to all the consumers across the country. But this is, of course, hard because people don't accept the expansion of transmission lines next to their villages, and there's a lot of acceptance problems. And there it comes into the harder problems. I think expansion of networks is very important. Expansion of transmission capacity between the European countries is important in order to establish an even stronger European electricity market, which of course then makes electricity cheaper and cheaper in a situation where this is quite tense and electricity costs have been rising sharply. And we need flexibility, and in electricity markets, as Germany in particular. So in Germany, we will not have big producers of electricity like in France and nuclear power plants, but we will have renewables and flexible gas power plants that in the medium run will run on hydrogen. And in this very volatile system, we need demand-side flexibility in order to react to the supply that is fluctuating due to the renewables. And this is some challenge that we have to tackle, and also the incentives. I mean, the electricity markets, which imply a uniform price across big areas, like, for example, Germany, and are interconnected at the European level. These uniform price electricity markets, they do not have incentives for local flexibilities. And this is a challenge that we have to tackle. And there's a discussion ongoing on this.
So for Europe, just to understand that a bit better, so is there the point we need to more deeply integrated energy market for maybe different sources of energy. But when it comes to renewables, I understand one of the problems of renewables is the volatility in production. Wind is blowing or wind is not blowing. The sun is shining, not shining. By having a more deeply integrated European market, actually we can tap the different climate zones, if you wish, and that makes it overall more stable.
Yeah,
and then at a level more, that is mainly the effect that we want to see. Yeah. And for that, we need to go ahead.
Yeah, you can mainly level this out, of course, if you have a deeper integrated market. And also, you can, of course, benefit from production at the cheapest location possible at every point in time. And therefore, integration is good. And I think we need it for electricity, but we also need it for hydrogen. And hydrogen is the part of the story that is not yet completely understood, I think. So in some countries, it is not that important to get it quickly because the countries do not have such a strong industrial sector. In Germany, with the big industry that is depending on energy-intensive pre-products and feedstocks like gas at the moment, they have to switch to hydrogen-based energy carriers, so energy based on green hydrogen, or they have to leave the country if they do not expect that they are provided with it here. I think we have to import these energy carriers to Europe because it's just there's just too much electricity needed to produce it all here. So it does not pay off to reduce electricity costs for these industries. But what is important is to set up mechanisms in order to import hydrogen and hydrogen-based energy carriers in large quantities to Europe. We should do it jointly in Europe because the more we import, the less the electricity consumption here in Europe for hydrogen production increases our electricity prices. We have attractive opportunities to diversify our energy imports and become less dependent from big autocracies that provide us with fossil energies today. And if we do it jointly in Europe, we can diversify and cooperate with a lot of countries worldwide that have good conditions for producing renewable hydrogen. And we should do it not as a colonialism 2.0, but we should do it as a cooperation that is to the benefits of both. So those countries can also benefit from maybe bigger expansion of the renewables so that they can benefit from renewable energy in their country as well. Desalination plants could be scaled bigger so that water provision could be solved for the countries. So there are a lot of possibilities to benefit from these corporations on both sides.
And again, I mean, having those contracts is again a European issue because you want to do it at a European scale, and Europe negotiating with outside nations rather than the Netherlands and Germany and France and each going to other country. That is your vision?
It should be a joint European issue. It could be set up in different ways. It could also be set up as a coalition of the willing. Could also be set up a mechanism at the European level and that is used by different European countries that use own funding in order to use a mechanism to procure hydrogen worldwide. So there are a lot of possible setups one can think of. But what is crucial is, I think, you have to see that this will become very important, and it will be very expensive to ramp up these markets. So it's very important to set up mechanisms that reduce the necessary subsidies as much as possible. So competitive procurement from countries worldwide. You have to procure long-term contracts in order to get private financing in, but you want to have it as the lowest cost possible. But even if you do this, you will still pay much more per kilogram of hydrogen than you get based on the willingness to pay of the off-takers in Europe. So at the beginning, there will be the necessity to finance, to subsidize this cost differential between the price you pay and the willingness to pay for the hydrogen in Europe.
How should we think about that also in terms of competitiveness with the US, right? So will that, if we go that path, will that bring us at a level where the US is? I mean, if you now compare prices and energy prices also in the medium term, we are a multiple of what the prices are in the US, right? Which indeed puts a disadvantage at our competitiveness. So if we think about competitiveness, this is the path to get more competitive?
I think first you can say if we don't do it, we will become much less competitive than the US. Because then we will have a problem with very scarce energy provision in Europe. And this, of course, increases prices massively. If we have cooperation and contracts with attractive production locations worldwide, these will very likely be locations where it's cheaper to produce hydrogen than in the US. The US will try to become autark in their renewable energy provision. So, and Europe will be dependent also in this renewable world. Europe will be dependent from imports, maybe 40% of the primary energy that we remain importing. And if we address and cooperate with attractive countries, then I think we can increase our relative competitiveness. But we have to act now.
I mean, you mentioned before investment in technology, now investment here. There's a lot to invest. Somebody has to pay that and provide the funding. I really appreciate it in the report that you make a case about capital market union in terms of the kind of funding that we need, risk capital, but also in terms of it needs to be European. So we have been supporting capital market union quite a while. I mean, what from your perspective is the compelling argument that we can tell people that have doubts about the European capital market union that this is the way to go?
Yeah, I think it is a necessity. The German Council of Economic Experts also has been promoting it for quite a while. It's a pity that we are not heard. But you see, if you realize the ambitious goals of the European Union, for example, in the Green Deal, then it is pretty clear that several companies have to grow tremendously and invest tremendously in the upcoming decade in order to build the network, in order to expand the renewables, in order to procure and produce hydrogen. These are massive investments. And of course, you need the financing for these investments. And you don't get it in Europe at the moment under the current conditions. Therefore, we have to act in order to make financing more attractive in Europe, because otherwise our companies will not realize the growth at the pace that is needed, or they go to other regions worldwide, to the US, and then we import all these goods that we need in order to ramp up our energy system, for example. And this would also be not a very attractive scenario.
No, it would not, certainly not. No, what I find very interesting is your specialty is more energy, mine is more finance, but the arguments are, for me, for capital market union are essentially the same as your arguments for energy market union in a way. So we are world champions in savings in Europe overall, if you look at our current account. So we are saving and exporting quite some capital. We should invest it at home. If you want to do that and convince people, we need to have attractive investment opportunities, and better we create them within Europe than just within a country. That creates better opportunities. Second, we want to diversify in order to have safer, to be better, to have a safe return on our savings, and that we convert into investment. So I think it's pretty much the same argument why that can actually work. And then the other point that we see a lot, because we act in the market, we sell our bonds, is that scale matters, right? So if you want to attract investors' money on big scale, you better be big and have a big market, and so that adds to the success.
Yeah, I think it's also very important to see that, especially for venture capital. I mean, it is also very important to have the analysis capacity here in Europe in order to be able to judge the attractiveness of different projects. And there we, of course, have a disadvantage. So we have even to overcompensate different disadvantages that we have in Europe, because we have different languages, different regulatory systems. So it's much more difficult for the analysts to judge whether European projects are attractive and have a chance in their country on the world market than it is in a unified market as in the US. And I think this explains part of the story why, for example, venture capital is not that massively available in Europe as in the US, but it is not explaining the whole story for Germany, because you see at the same time that there are other countries where there's much more venture capital available than in Germany, even in other European member states with non-English or Spanish language.
Yeah, I mean, I think scale is one thing, but we also certainly need to do more creating the demand and changing habits. And we want people to invest safe, so we need more education. But certainly also the tendency to hold cash or put your money in the banks is different here than it is elsewhere, which in turn is also a function of the pension system and how much pension is provided. Yeah, but well, we are coming closer to the end of the time that we have, and I would find it a pity to let you go without not at least talking for a moment on the debt brake and how we think about the fiscal situation. And I do this obviously also from a European perspective, and now there was an agreement in Europe on the economic governance review of a revised Stability and Growth Pact, where the intention is essentially to have safe financing, but at the same time create some space for investment and set incentives for investment. So, and against that background, many people look at Germany and are a bit worried about the Constitutional Court ruling and what to make out of this. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, on the one hand, the positive message is that the Constitutional Court did not decide completely politically. It was clear that somehow the planning of the government was not in line with the Constitution. So it was a surprise that the ruling was as strict as it was, that they declared it unconstitutional, also backwards. But it is also good news that if there is an inconsistency between what the government does and the Constitution, this is also seen and accounted for by the court. So the consequences of this ruling are, at the first glance, not as severe as one might have thought in the first moment. So for 2024, currently there are 17 billion missing. That's an amount that is maybe possible to save. So there are different means that the government might have to tackle this. They already became a little bit more ambitious in CO2 pricing, which generates income and a little bit room for maneuver. They did not really manage to agree on consistent savings that is still
we see the farmers on the street.
It's still in the making. We see the farmers on the streets, and we see that politicians react to this in so far. And there are already demands for massive special funds for climate protection, 400, 600 billion special funds. But I think this is also a problematic way of going, to have funds outside of the budget to deal with everything that within the budget is not working out. So I think we will have to have a discussion in Germany how to deal with it, and this is not really settled. So again, an exemption rule for 2024 will not be possible. So there is, at the moment, no real reason to argue for an exemption of the debt brake for 2024. There's no big catastrophe hitting us that affects the German budget drastically. So these special funds have a problem because this is, in a way, very intransparent, and it is not clear what you will put into it. Is it really investment, or is it not super high subsidies? So there will be still a debate ongoing on this.
On that one, I find interesting that also this kind of special fund arrangement doesn't work under European rule. You have general government.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't help under Stability and Growth
Yeah.
Pact. But just kind of from your perspective. So, and again, the European rules were changed in order to also set more incentives for growth, which you have now via the adjustment period. If you do reforms, if you do growth initiatives, you can get a longer adjustment period from 4, it's extended from 4 to 7 years. Would you not wish that the German debt brake sets a stronger incentive for growth and for investment?
I think in a way it's problematic. I mean, you had these, we had this golden rule where you had basically an exemption for investments, but it is very difficult to define what is exactly a future-oriented investment that really pays off. And then there are these proposals that there should be exemptions for net investments, but it's very difficult to achieve net investments. For example, in the education sector, we will have decrease of the population, so we will have to invest massively until we are at net investment. So that this is not giving more room for maneuver. And I think this general cap on debt is the right way to go. Maybe in Germany we have, for very low debt levels, a rule that is a little bit too strict, because the structural deficit that is allowed is completely independent of the debt level at the moment. And we have the problem that after a crisis, there is no transition path to the regular situation. So you have to comply with the rules of the debt brake after the year of an exemption immediately. And this is, of course, quite a challenging situation, as we have observed now. So I think there is some room for maneuver, maybe, but I think golden rule to make exemptions, that is very easy to become very political, and this is very dangerous in a system that is a multi-party system, where there are a lot of interests of the different parties, and a federal system where you have to compensate at the federal level for everything that you want to do. You have to compensate also interest groups and countries at the federal level. And I think this can become very expensive.
Yeah, I agree. Germany is maybe complex. Europe is even more complex, I think. But in that regard, I also find the European solution that was found in setting that incentive by not linking it to a golden rule, but linking it to an investment, a national plan, actually a rather smart one, and an element that I like. Whatever it is, we want Germany to invest smartly. You want Germany to invest smartly. I myself, because we want Germany to grow, we want Europe to grow. We need good investment in Europe. It has been a great chance to talk to you. It has been a big pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.